We have looked at the way governance was described by World Bank and UNDP and so on. By combining those definitions, which perhaps we don't want to debate this too much, but perhaps they had more structural, they perhaps had some agenda behind those definitions. But as we move into the, as we come to the present and we factor in the things which are happening with the social media and the mobiles and so on, the current definitions of governance has evolved into something which is rather very simple, again a two-word phrase, good governance. So when we talk about governance, by implication we are trying to convey the meaning of good governance. What do we mean by good governance? We mean all the things which perhaps meant during the agrarian times, which meant during the industrial revolution times and so on, but we are also consciously wanting to include in our definition of good governance issues and concerns of transparency, issues and concerns of accountability, of reduction in subjective way of working. So we want the government to be answerable in and to function in such a way that there is a rule of law, not only at a very macro country level where there are legislation for crime and so on, but also at a very micro departmental functioning level where decisions are backed by very clear, transparent rules and regulations. So this is our definition of good governance, and we are able to say by way of defining e-governance that e-governance is really good governance, which is brought about by introduction of ICT, the information and communication technology, into the domain of government. I mean, there are a lot of formal definitions, but I think for our purposes it would suffice if we say use of ICT to bring about good governance, to transform the way governments work, best describes what e-governance is. But this is again, we don't have very clear examples which is obvious from this definition. I'm sure, I wonder if Mr. Kapoor, with this, a lot of experience, with nearly 60 years of experience in dealing with the ICT, governments and industry, can better explain what is good governance.
I think, Harish, you're very aptly covering good governance last couple of minutes. I think key important thing in the good governance, I would say that the services that are offered to the stakeholder, in this case could be citizens or whoever, are highly proficient and highly satisfactory. At the end of the day, the citizens and the stakeholder should be happy with services that are offered by the good governance, as I think you are trying to say. In other words, one could say also that if government is invisible and works behind the scene and still produces results, would be a criteria to me a good governance in some sense. And I am reminded of a small story which I think on daily basis we all experienced when we were children, we were children or otherwise. The mother in the house, she gets up at least 2 hours before the children and the spouse or husband get up to go to school or the office, and she behind the scene, without disturbing the spouse or the children, lights the stove, boils the water, milk or what have you, and keep the breakfast ready whenever the children or husband are going to the office, with including dabba and with them. And all that happens without anybody knowing that behind the scene there's so much of work has gone in for the last 2 hours or so, to the satisfaction of these stakeholders, in this case children and husband. And I think that is to me a really a good governance which is worked behind the scene to the satisfaction of this. And I must add, it is 24/7, almost 24/7.
Correct.
Right.
And as they say that mother has no leave.
True.
So is government doesn't have any leave.
True, fair
Yeah,
enough.
thank you,
I
Harish.
think, like I mentioned, this simple examples are able to convey the spirit of what we are trying to say when we keep using the word e-governance. I think it is best to remember this example where
It's a very, very apt example to say what is a good governance and how the services of governance seamlessly delivered to the stakeholders, more
Exactly.
importantly.
True.
Exactly.
I think